Welcome to American Education FM, everybody. I'm Dr. Sean Brooks. Welcome back, everybody. Okay, I got to tell you, this has been one heck of a week. It really has. There's been a lot of disclosure this week. There's been a lot of revelations, a lot of Q deltas, a lot of things like that, all happening all at the exact same time. Again, I think it should be more proof that a lot of this is completely coordinated. There are great people, again, clearly involved with what's going down here. There's always room for asking questions. There's always room for speculation. I'm not saying, of course, that everything that's going to happen, of course, during the future is going to be a good thing necessarily. I have absolutely no idea what's really going to take place. Again, there's a lot of speculation regarding a lot of moves, as we've discussed here on the show, regarding artificial intelligence and, the technocratic state and a number of other things. But I want to focus on some of the positives that are going down right now. And I'll start with this one very quickly. Everybody knows that Ilhan Omar, one of the representatives for the state of Minnesota, is an illegal alien. This has been well documented since her arrival from Somalia or wherever the hell she came from, Indonesia, someplace around there. I think Somalia. Anyway, as it was always stated even from the very beginning, that she married her brother in order to get into the United States, which of course is immigration fraud. But here in recent days, her entire existence and all of that illegality and all of that fraud has finally come to a head here, which is good. And I think, again, the introduction of ICE into the national scene yet again and the roundups that are taking place regarding illegal aliens, she would certainly get swept up in this. Again, to her credit, Marjorie Taylor Greene took to the floor of the House of Representatives to call her out as being an illegal alien and saying that she's violating U.S. law and that she should again be removed from Congress immediately. That was an excellent move. Now it's worked its way back to the state of Minnesota. So I want to play a little bit of audio here. This is from State Representative, again, Republican out of Minnesota, Steve Drakowski. And it says here in this particular X post, he has the receipts, affidavits, eviction notices, documents, certainly demanding for the arrest of Ilhan Omar for the crimes of federal tax fraud, federal immigration fraud, federal student loan fraud, and state violations of perjury, bigamy, incest, kickbacks, and acts of campaign fraud abuse from East Coast to the Mississippi River, Boston, Washington, New York, Chicago, and Florida. Again, they've had this woman in the crosshairs since she showed up here. And finally, there's enough people in office to actually pull her card now. This is a good thing. Shouldn't stop with just her, but again, the panic is very real. So listen to Steve Drakowski here for a few minutes, and he will lay some of this out and describe this in 3, 2, 1.
Omar on the U.S. House Committee on Foreign Affairs. I'm also asking Congresswoman Craig to initiate an ethics investigation into Congresswoman Omar because of questions about federal tax fraud, federal immigration fraud, federal student loan fraud, state violations of perjury, bigamy, kickbacks, and acts of campaign fraud abuse in Boston, Washington, New York, Chicago, and Florida. There are also violations of state ethics or of the Minnesota House ethics rules regarding colleges for speeches she gave while she was in partial control of their budgets as a member of the House Higher Education Finance Committee in both 2017 and 2018. She was found guilty of the violations by the Minnesota Campaign Finance Board 3 weeks ago in order to return those funds on June 6th. Ms. Omar appears to be a serial career criminal and should not have access to our nation's highest secrets and intelligence. That is why I'm calling on our Congresswoman Angie Craig to protect both our national security and our respect of the rule of law. Tax fraud, immigration fraud, student loan fraud, perjury, bigamy, kickbacks, and campaign abuse fraud from the East Coast to the Mississippi River. If those charges have been brought against Congresswoman Michelle Bachmann, the Star Tribune would not have said on Sunday that she was attempting to, quote, skirt the law, and then followed up with a front page story the next day on a pie in the sky proposal that had zero chances of becoming law. Minnesota deserves better. America demands more.
Okay, let me do something real quick. First of all, I want to apologize very quickly. I'm not sure exactly when that audio took place, nor am I exactly sure what day or even year, I should say, that Marjorie Taylor Greene took to the floor of the U.S. House of Representatives to basically bash Ilhan Omar for, again, being an illegal alien. The point is that endless people know this. The documentation exists. They have her dead to rights. All they have to do is hand this over to Pam Bondi, and that should be the end of it. Again, the federal government has oversight and jurisdiction over state AGs. And the state AG in Minnesota is Keith Ellison, who we know is dirtier than dirty gets. But he's not going to be able to protect Ilhan Omar. I mean, they need to pack her up and get her out of here. At the very least, she should be incredibly fined, if not jailed in our country, and of course removed from Congress. But this has to happen. So I like the fact that it's been gaining steam on the internet and certainly on social media. It's a very good thing. And again, this is an open and shut case. It's so obvious, it's painful. There's also this. Again, just as a quick little reminder, there was a Q post, which is Q post 700, and it was dated February 9th. And then it simply says this. It says next week in kill brackets. It says next week below that in kill brackets, and then it says next week below that in kill brackets, and then below that it says suicide weekend, which again, next week is basically the entire month of February into at least the first week of March. So it's interesting simply because the number of searches here on Google in the Washington, D.C. area in the District of Columbia from the 1st of February through the 19th of February. The number of searches is incredible when it comes to looking for a criminal lawyer. Same thing with individuals who have actually committed suicide, as the suicide rate has gone up in that particular area. Same thing with the layoffs throughout the entire course of the month. And then same thing with fraud and people searching the term fraud. Again, these are all Google searches from individuals in that general area. So all of them, again, are on the rise. I don't think that's an accident. That clearly has a lot to do with what Doge and the military are finding out about what's going on. These individuals, again, are selling their homes. That's been going on for quite some time. It's the highest housing market right now, I believe, in the general DC area than ever before. This is a good thing. This is what draining the swamp looks like. I also have to mention this too. There's two more Q posts that are kind of interesting regarding what's going on right now, again, that have kind of bounced around some of these chat boards here and are making the rounds. There's one here over on X, and this specifically has to do with actually the NSA's X account. And then they directly compare this again to post number 26, which is, of course, one of the earlier posts when Q was making posts back in the day, certainly in 2017. But this was from February 19th of 2025 here, where the NSA said the following. It says hashtag ICYMI. It says Hydra, GHIDRA, which apparently is the cybersecurity network that they use, and it says 11.3 as new features to supercharge work on your cybersecurity challenges. We added the long requested built-in Python 3 support based on Hydra with a P, PHYIDRA. It says a P code, accelerated emulator, and original source code to binary linking. And then it says check it out at github.com/national security, and then there's a full website. And then it shows the logo of Hydra, which is this dragon in the infinity symbol. Again, the 11.3 thing is interesting because that ties to a number of different things based on a number of different analyses that a number of people have done, even dating back to the Law of War Manual and a number of other things. But post number 26 on the Q boards was from November 1st, of 2017, and it says, think about it logically. The only way is the military. fully controlled. It says save and spread. Once 11.3 verifies as first marker. Biggest advanced drop on poll. Unquote. Again, I'm not 100% certain what all of that means, other than the fact that we know that the military is behind all of this. This is too coordinated. There's no way that they wouldn't be. Again, it's not just, like I've said, it's not a couple of tech bros walking into a building and cleaning house and looking at a bunch of these old bureaucrats and saying, well, you're fired, it's time for you to get out of here. There's other things happening here. There's no doubt about it. Well, again, whether these individuals have even received emails that say, don't show up to work tomorrow, we have our professionals in your building and we're conducting the work there and you don't have to, you're permanently on leave or you've been removed from your job or whatever it is. There are operations taking place here. Again, it's far too coordinated. And then, of course, there's this, which is Q drop 3879, which is dated February 20th of 2020. And it just so happens, of course, that as I'm recording this on Thursday, February 20th, today is the day where Kash Patel is supposed to be voted in by the Senate officially to be the FBI director. Well, in this particular post, Kash Patel's name pops up. In fact, it is the main post that is reposted by Q himself. So someone else makes a post on February 20th, again, the exact same day, approximately 5 minutes earlier. And then Q reposts this post, which was from X, and it just says Q proof, Kash Patel, and then they included a previous drop, which is number 1481, where it says Kash Patel, name to remember Q. And then at the bottom of the message from that same day, Q says the following, quote, primary purpose for referencing Twitter accounts, question mark, together you are invincible, connected, united, where we go one, we go all, Q. The reason that they reference Twitter accounts and will repost Twitter accounts, they're doing that to basically tell people that this is legit. They're doing this to show individuals that, yes, you're figuring things out as a populace as to what we're doing and what's going on and how this is not an accident. And a great deal of this is, in fact, coordinated. This is not accidental. Again, it's not an accident that Donald Trump gets on Truth Social and then will repost particular Q-related posts from other people. And other people, again, will make Q-related comments and then he reposts them. It's a way of him telling other individuals that this is legit, that we have figured this out by and large, that there's no way this is accidental, this is 100% coordinated. Anybody criticizing it, again, maybe you didn't read the posts back when they were happening, that's fine, but to blindly criticize something, even if individuals, again, were a part of it at one time or just criticize it right out of the gate like the Alex Joneses of the world, well, then you got a problem. Because again, this is not accidental. It's not Elon Musk knocking on the front door of some building and be like, I own this whole building now. This is the way that this works. That's not it. This is executive branch, military control of our government, going after endless individuals, and of course, all of this bureaucracy. In fact, there's this thread here on X, which I wanted to read very quickly. This is from a Rod D. Martin, at Rod D. Martin, again on X. Short, small thread here, but it's about 8 posts long. And it says the following here, quote, breaking Trump just won't stop. It says the president just dropped another executive order that could reshape the entire federal government. Here's what you need to know. It says the order gives president direct control over independent, quote unquote, agencies that have operated outside the White House influence for decades. This is huge. Constitution Article 2, Section 1 puts the power exclusively in the president. It says the deep state has ignored that since the 30s. We're talking about agencies with massive power. The Federal Elections Commission, the FCC, the SEC, and the Federal Trade Commission have operated as their own dictatorial Democrat kingdoms for decades. It says no longer. It says the order requires all of these agencies to submit their regulations to Trump budget chief Russ Vought, who helped write the Project 2025 blueprint. It says elections have to matter. If these agencies aren't responsible to the elected branches and voters, we aren't free. Now, real quick, again, on the Project 2025 stuff, again, I read that document whatever it was, 2 years ago on my show, and certainly parts of it pertaining to the field of education. Again, I don't like the Heritage Foundation in the slightest. They're part of the Jewish lobby. With that said, the one thread that does run throughout the entire document is getting rid of wasteful spending. There is no doubt about that, which again is a good thing, and I don't think anybody can really deny that unless, of course, people have something to hide. But again, I'm not a proponent of these propositions that these NGOs write for basically whoever it is that walks into office, and then they start implementing these particular kinds of things. But again, if it's wasteful spending, I'm all for it. If it's for moving bureaucrats around and giving them different names and different titles, I don't like that either. But anyway, with that aside for just a minute, it goes on, it says, Vaught's OMB will now write performance standards for agency heads and report directly to Trump about who's following orders and who isn't. It says no more freelancing. Elections are going to matter again. It goes on, it says, even better, the order forces these agencies to hire White House liaisons, basically the president's eyes and ears inside every agency. Remember when USAID told the Senate it didn't have to submit to oversight? Those days are gone. It goes on, it says, when Democrats created these agencies a century ago and pretended it was to keep politics out, quote unquote, it says total lie. They're all staffed by Democrats who stay and rule no matter who wins the White House. And anyway, what does keep politics out really mean? Keeping voters out. It goes on, it says 20 state attorney generals just backed Trump at the Supreme Court of the United States, led by Florida AG James Altemeyer. I'm saying that right. It says, yet again, the free state of Florida stands up for our rights and the Constitution. It wraps up here, a couple more posts. It says, the Fed gets a special carve-out for monetary policy, because if you're going to have a central bank, you shouldn't. It has to be independent to work, rather. It says, of course, last year the Fed cut rates to help Biden and Harris election chances, so more reform is needed. And then it wraps up here and it says, the establishment will scream that this is about a power grab. Don't buy it. This is about their power to keep running the government no matter who's president. Elections have to matter, plain and simple. The Uniparty hates that and hates the Constitution. Unquote. This is certainly a very good step, I think, that's taking place here. It's rather obvious that that's the case. I mean, you have a number of different people, of course, screaming at the top of their lungs that they want all of this to stop, that it's a power grab and everything else. We know that it isn't. The executive branch of the United States has oversight over all of these agencies. The problem in the past is they've just chosen not to. They've openly said, well, we're going to hire this person to run that particular agency or a handful of bureaucrats to run that agency. And then what we'll do is we'll just trust them, knowing full well that what have they been doing this whole time, which of course is now out in the open. They've been stealing from everyone, all of us, for a very long time. So yeah, they should hang. But also, and this has to be brought up too, and I want to spend some time on this also, one of the reasons that all of this is transpiring the way that it is now, and the reason, of course, unfortunately, that it's been allowed to be gotten away with for as long as it has, is because of election fraud. Because they've never brought in anybody who openly wanted to catch these individuals and reform any of this, and again, downsize and just flat out fire people. Frank, on Quite Frankly, the other night, it would have been Wednesday night, had a guest on from United Sovereign Americans. And their website is uniteforfreedom.com. She threw up a chart which is really interesting, and I've been trying to look for the actual full chart to where it's easier to see, and I unfortunately can't find it. But she runs through the importance of what is actually going on here regarding voter fraud and the process of voting, and all of the different checks and balances that are supposed to exist within this entire process. Frank's guest was a woman by the name of Marley Hornick, and it really is a very good presentation, but she again goes through this particular chart, which I'll try to read for you right here. Imagine on the left-hand side, you basically have the entire process of elections from top to bottom. everything from, again, what is currently in place in order for individuals to vote, which is called the process requirements. Of course, you have to be a legal citizen, et cetera, et cetera. And then it goes down to real voters. Again, you have to be a real citizen, you have to be a certain age, you have to have the proper documentation, all of that. And then there's a process called real votes. This, of course, has to do with tallying actual, realistic votes, not fraudulent votes by any stretch of the imagination. Then, of course, the business of counting those votes and how those have to be real counts. And then finally, the real proof of, in fact, there not being fraud, therefore you can continue to certify an election. At the very top, under, again, process requirements, it says, risk management framework applied. It says, test and monitor every process for dynamic, evolving threat controls. It says, if you don't do that, then you have to stop the entire process, and you have to go back and rework the entire process to make sure that everything is fixed properly and ethically and sound in order to, again, move on to the very next step. You cannot move from one step to the next without making sure that the very first thing that you're doing is ethically sound and in place accurately. So again, you're talking again about all of the contractors and the equipment that you're using and everything else. And it lays that out here. It says certification of equipment, contractors, process, and personnel. Again, you have to have all of those places and people in place in order to be able to carry out an actual election. It then says registration agencies and NGOs submission of voter registration. This is under the real voters section. In this particular section, she specifically mentions voter ID. And she says everybody gets real excited about voter ID, and she says, and that's important, and that has to be legit. But you can have all the voter ID in the world. If the machines that you're voting on don't work, then it doesn't matter. You can have all of the illegal aliens with alleged voter ID. Again, if they're voting on bad machines, or they're voting unethically or illegally, or certainly in ways that could be fraudulent in the future, then it's not going to matter how much voter ID you actually have. Again, she openly advocates for voter ID, and she wants that to be the case, and rightfully so. But this is where it gets even more complicated. Again, if you can't verify that individuals are actually supposed to be voters, in this process, again, you're supposed to stop. And you can't move on to the next step, which means you have to go back to the very beginning and make sure that everything is in place to make sure that you actually have real human beings voting. You can see how all of this has been, again, made up throughout the entire course of time. The whole voter roll debate that took place, where you had dead people voting, and you had individuals, again, who have been dead who were still on the voter rolls. All of that is illegal. You're not supposed to have people on the voter rolls who are no longer alive, which means the very election taking place in those areas of the United States where that's the case, which, let's face it, it's everywhere, that means that the entire election shouldn't have even taken place, regardless of what election it's for. It goes on here then, again, when it comes to real voters, and it gets down to what are tabulated as real votes. It then says, again, you have to have a voter roll and actual verification. The voter roll process then goes down to, of course, the three ways in which people can vote, which is in-person voting, absentee voting, and mail-in ballots. The mail-in ballots thing is the newest form of voting, which is completely fraudulent, as we all know. Which means, again, if any of these fail verification or validation of any kind, again, whether it be mail-in, absentee, or in-person, you have to stop the entire thing. And you have to go back and you have to fix it. And if that means eliminating particular ways of people from, to keep people from voting certain ways, certainly with mail-in ballots, then that's what you have to do. But that didn't happen either, and hasn't been happening. So then again, it goes to a judging table where, again, if these particular votes are judged properly, then everything moves forward ethically. If they aren't, and some of them are fraudulent, then that means the whole thing is fraudulent. It's like when we were growing up in school and you were taking a true and false question. If part of the question that you're being asked to answer, if it's true or false, if part of it is false, then the whole thing is false. But unfortunately, again, that's not happening with voting in our country. If some of it's false, well, then they just don't count that vote and they just move forward. But they're counting fraudulent votes. It then, of course, goes to the tabulation process. If the tabulation is verified, then it moves on to the upload of those tallies. If there's an error, then it has to go through an adjudication process. If the votes that are tallied fail that process, then you have to stop. You have to stop everything. And you have to completely start over. You have to figure out where the flaw existed, go back, repair the flaw completely to make sure that there are no flaws whatsoever, and then you redo everything. Of course, this isn't happening all on election day. They're not going back and fixing the problem. They're just ramming the problem through. They're adding more problems onto it, and then endless people are voting who have no business voting. And then, of course, as we all know, votes are being counted for individuals that don't even exist, or they're being rerun through the same machines over and over again by the same people. Again, once it's uploaded, and the tallies are actually uploaded via a thumb drive usually, if it fails the chain of command, then there has to be a full stop on the entire thing. Again, if the adjudication process fails, again, there has to be a full stop on everything. If it is positive and everything goes through, or it's just rammed through even though it's fraudulent, it has to go to the chief election official in Washington, D.C. or at the state level. And then again, you have what it says here, a vote tally and management system, which is, again, an individual who's receiving all of these thumb drives with all of these votes on them. And then media reporting. The three of those processes, as we all know, is also completely fraudulent. You have the media telling you one thing, you have vote tallies and management systems telling you something else, and then uploading fraudulent votes. And then you have the chief election official, which receives all of this information and then shoots it down again to the audits process, which is the actual real proof that there was, in fact, voter fraud or no voter fraud whatsoever. And then, of course, everything is certified and stored. And this is also, of course, where Washington, D.C. gets involved, and they just ram it home through also, whether or not they've done any kind of an investigation of voter fraud in the slightest. Again, if you recall in 2020, which of course was the very beginning of 2021 regarding the 2020 election, not every congressman or woman voted to approve the election. They didn't vote to certify it. They knew that there was voter fraud. They knew that their constituents were reaching out to them and saying, you can't certify this. There has to be a full-blown investigation because there was voter fraud. And of course, they did what they were supposed to do. They said no. The problem is the majority of the individuals on both sides of the aisle said yes. And they rammed home the entire thing. They didn't do what they were supposed to do. And that includes, again, everybody who said, yep, no problem, there was no voter fraud. If there's even a little bit of evidence of voter fraud, you have to go back and redo the entire thing. And again, that's the way that it's always supposed to be. But that's not what's been going on. The reason that I bring this up also is because Amazing Polly had a video here recently, again, where she's criticizing a lot of the Con Inc. individuals, and rightfully so. And she's criticizing Donald Trump and some of the individuals that, again, he has around him. And I fully understand that criticism also. I think to some degree, Polly should, continue to pay attention to Canadian politics also, because they're dirty enough up there as it is. But even so, she has an excellent point, and she brings up a particular thing having to do with the year of 2026. And apparently, again, this is just according to her, that in the year 2026, the statute of limitations on election fraud, certainly for the 2020 election, would run out. Now, here's the thing. I don't think that's true. Because what you're talking about is treason. What you're talking about is sedition. And there's no statute of limitations on treason or sedition. It just so happens that voter fraud was one of the mechanisms to carry that plan out. It was just one of them. So again, I'm not a lawyer, but I'm just saying that I don't think there's any statute of limitations on treason and sedition. And again, Election fraud was just one piece of the puzzle here. You can't say that there's a statute of limitations on election fraud and not all the other methods also that were all contributing to treason and sedition to keep Donald Trump again out of office. It's all fair game. It's all open. It's all open to everybody, I think. And certainly the belief here, and certainly I think part of the plan, is to have Pam Bondi go after this directly. Again, she had her hands on all of the evidence dating back to those fake impeachments of Donald Trump. That, of course, was all planned. That was all on purpose. It was the enemy trying to get rid of him permanently so that he could never run for office ever again. It didn't work. She saw all that evidence. You have Kash Patel now, again, about to be confirmed here as I'm talking. In fact, as I'm talking, Mitch McConnell has basically just said he's not going to run for re-election, so he's finished out of the Senate, which is good. Kash Patel is going to get confirmed. Wouldn't be surprised if old Mitch either, heads off to Gitmo or gets executed or whatever, because he's a traitor also. But even so, there's just been too much illegality here, and to not reverse 2020 would be a colossal mistake. So no, I don't think there's a statute of limitations on it. I think it's going to move forward. I think it has to move forward, because you talk about reversing everything that Biden did, and then, ironically enough, also on X today, for some reason, you have the entire hour-long presentation taking place out of Maricopa County from many, many, many years ago, where Joe Arpaio was, I believe, certainly in charge there, and the lead sheriff there, and they're tossing around the entire presentation of Obama's birth certificate being fraudulent. Why that's making the rounds now again today is beyond me, but it's a good presentation, and it's also, again, not new. It's probably close to 10 years old. But even so, good presentation. If you haven't watched it, I highly recommend it. Yes, his birth certificate that they provided, again, to other agencies in the federal government was fraudulent. He wasn't born in the United States. We know that. So that would be like saying again that there's a statute of limitations on Barack Obama's election. Well, there isn't. You got to go back and you got to reverse that one also. Then, of course, you're talking about getting rid of Supreme Court justices and then stacking them with new ones. Because all of those picks and all of Obama's picks for Supreme Court justice, well, they got to go too. Sotomayor and Kagan, they got to hit the bricks. Jackson for Biden, she's got to hit the bricks. And you're starting over. So there you go. I don't know. This has to get cleaned up is the whole thing. 2020 has to get cleaned up, and previous elections have to get cleaned up. We have to start over with all of this. It's far too important. Again, on that same wavelength, I'm going to move to jab-related things here. I really don't have anything education-related to bring up for this particular episode other than to say there are still ongoing threats, quote-unquote, that are taking place across the nation, whether they be real or fake. Again, the school environment is a playground for the brainwashed and for the socially engineered and social engineering. And unfortunately, again, there's 911 calls going out, fake bomb threats, a number of other things. Allegedly, 2 girls in the Houston area of Texas were allegedly detained by the FBI because they were planning some mass school shooting or mass casualty event, as the FBI would lead people to believe. I don't know one way or another. I just know, again, that in the interest of stirring up panic, they're always going to use children in the school environment in order to do so. Just another reason to get your children out. Again, that's my 2 cents. I've beaten that dead horse as much as humanly possible and will continue to beat it. I guarantee it. But regarding, again, the disclosures that are taking place and going back in time and basically fixing history, the COVID lie has got to be one of them. This has to be something, again, that is reversed. This has to be something that will show endless Americans and individuals across the nation that you cannot trust the medical industry under any circumstance whatsoever, that when strangers come on your TV and tell you to do something, you should probably not do it. Certainly when it comes to putting needles in your body filled with substances for which you can't even name a single ingredient. You've heard me say that a gazillion times. But I put together a Substack article the other day, which is now up on the americanclassroom.substack.com, titled The Ongoing COVID Disclosures, Non-Stop News Headlines That Should Terrify the Vaccinated. These headlines keep coming out, And this week alone, including last week, have been two of the largest weeks of COVID disclosure. That is not accidental. That is clearly leading us in a direction of having these shots pulled off the market, if not temporarily, then certainly permanently. And I'll get into those specific articles here in just a minute because I have a couple that are even brand new that I want to bring up. But I just want to go through very quickly some of the titles of these headlines, again, that should terrify the vaccinated. This was from February 12th on Substack. Breaking: Kentucky becomes the 9th U.S. state with legislative efforts to ban mRNA injections. You would think that would terrify the injected. Again, why are state legislators even taking this up if COVID is real and the shots protect people? One from the Brownstone Institute, FDA lab uncovers excess DNA contamination in COVID-19 vaccines. Yep. One from Zero Hedge, FDA misled the judiciary about Pfizer vaccine documents. Back in 2022, which I mentioned before, they released only a certain amount, which was a great deal, of Pfizer documents regarding the shots, which were supposed to be hidden for 75 years. And turns out that that was only a fraction of the papers that they released. So many more are supposed to be released here. This is from Slay News, these next few. WHO reveals COVID vaccines cause global kidney failure surge. Study of 9 million confirms boosters cause deaths to surge. Study of 2.3 million COVID vaccines destroy immune system. One from druthers.com titled More Americans Died During COVID-19 Injections Than in World War I, World War II, and the Vietnam War combined. One from the Daily Mail titled COVID Now Officially Less Deadly Than Seasonal Flu. Again, jokes on everybody, neither one of those exist. But that right there again should prove to people you wouldn't take multiple flu shots in 1 year, and you shouldn't take any anyway, but people did. Again, the whole schedule of all of the different COVID shots that people were taking and that entire schedule vaccine card and all of that stuff, no one even backed off and said, wait a minute, this is all very odd. In fact, you have to give some credit to the Daily Mail being a left-wing outlet. They even have one of these headlines on their website, which is, it says the following here: have you been injured by the COVID vaccine? We want to hear your story. And then they provide their email address, health@dailymail.com. Now all of a sudden, they're interested in this. Again, even these people are disgusting because they see a profit in order to be made. I also, of course, included the article in which the individual had complete psychosis and electroshock therapy. I included that particular article as well in that headline. One from The Guardian, also again, left-wing outlet. Trump ends DEI in U.S. military and reinstates troops who refused COVID vaccines. Again, why did individuals in the military not want to take them? Is it because they were just being defiant against Joe Biden and Donald Trump at the end of 2020 and all of this other nonsense? Or is it because they knew what was going on? See, this is also one of those arguments that people, again, are having a hard time wrapping their head around. But in towns and cities all across the United States, you'll recall that endless nurses were striking. And even doctors were striking and saying, look, we're not going to work here and continue to work here if you're going to make us take those shots, make us wear masks, and make us hurt ourselves because we're treating these patients and they're all jabbed. So we're not going to do that. You would think that local city council members, school board members, whomever, would look at that and say, well, why are all those people striking? They're working inside of this hospital. They don't want to take these shots. What is it that they know that we don't? They didn't do that. They just ostracized those people and chalked it up to, well, they must be crazy. They're just not doing it because Joe Biden wants them to do it. No, that wasn't it. They knew more than other people. They were treating these very patients who were ill from all of these shots. Then, of course, you had President Trump's executive orders as well. Prohibits federal funding for COVID-19 vaccine mandates in schools. Keeps education accessible by ending the COVID-19 vaccine mandates in schools. Then you had NBC News, CDC disease detectors among hundreds fired as Trump administration ramps up agency cuts. You have another one from The Defender titled COVID Vaccine Injuries Woke Up Some People, Why Not Others? One from The Expose titled Witness Statement. This will be the basis for criminal prosecutions around the world for those who promoted and delivered the COVID bioweapons. And there's actually a documentary associated with that too, which is on that link. Another one from Fierce Healthcare titled Urgent CDC Data and Analysis on Influenza and Bird Flu Go Missing as Outbreaks Escalate. So the CDC is getting rid of information now regarding all of these fake viruses. Why is that the case? And then this one, which was arguably the most important from the week, also from the Daily Mail, COVID vaccine faces ban for all Americans in radical U-turn by Trump. In fact, I'm going to read this. This is from davidvance.net, and it's a summary of the Daily Mail article. But again, he titled this, COVID Jabs to be Banned in the United States, ? It says, well, it's 4 years too late, but it's still welcome news. COVID vaccines could be suspended for all age groups in America under radical new plans backed by key health figures in the Trump administration. Suspending them would be a good start, then banning them. It says, then going after all the snake oil salesmen that sold them as 100% safe and 100% effective. We could start with Fauci. Several experts poised for top jobs, it says, in U.S. health agencies subscribed to the disputed idea. The shots are causing widespread side effects and deaths. It says, I guess we should follow the experts, right? Dr. Jay Bhattacharya, who has been nominated to lead the National Institute of Health, NIH, has backed a petition calling for the mRNA vaccines to be paused and retested. DailyMail.com can reveal. He is one of the signatories of the HOPE Accord, which claims there is a causal link between mRNA shots and an alarming rise in excess deaths worldwide. Dr. Asim Malhotra, a British cardiologist being considered for a health advisory role in Kennedy's new health departments, has called for the jabs to be suspended and reassessed. It says, I know this is a bit late for those who have lost loved ones of the jab tyranny or who have suffered life-changing injuries, but it is a start. Clearly, the mRNA technology, quote unquote, has proved itself to be dangerous and untrustworthy, and proof that we were right all along when we claimed that the jab is the bioweapon, unquote. Again, this is huge. This is a big, big deal. There has to be a full removal and reversal of this. And as we know, if they take the shots off of the market, everybody's going to panic. That alone itself will cause people to panic. This is where, again, this is going to get nuts. This is going to get crazy. And here's, again, one of the avenues where this is going to get crazy. You have the same people who took the shots, got ill, and they tell themselves that predetermined line that they were fed, which is, well, I'm glad I took them because if I didn't, it could have been a whole lot worse. When you take the shots off the market now permanently, those people are still going to get sick. And they're going to swear that the reason that now they're getting sick is because they don't have access to the COVID shots. I mean, that's how stupid they're going to be regarding all of this. Some of them aren't going to say, well, wait a minute, the reason I've always been sick and been sick ever since taking them is because I keep taking them. That therein lies the problem. But there will be people who will say, the reason I'm more sick now is because I don't have access to them anymore. We need our life-saving COVID shots. Even when the proof is already out there that COVID doesn't exist, the shots do nothing, and everybody who's taking them is getting sick with permanently damaged DNA that you cannot repair. And that, again, they have chronic illnesses, cancers, a plethora of endless other illnesses, and they're dying. It's overwhelming. But their capacity for rationalization and disassociation is amazing. There was also this, and this was again attributed to Yale researchers, where again they have discovered, as this is in preprint here as of February 18th of 2025, This particular study titled the following: Immunological and Antigenic Signatures Associated with Chronic Illnesses After COVID-19 Vaccination. Point being, it gives you VAIDS. It breaks down your entire immune system. Your symptoms of being ill don't go away. Why? Because you've permanently poisoned yourself. And then if people keep taking them, well, you keep poisoning yourself. The aspect of this, which is hard for some to grasp, is that by just taking them the first time, you've already permanently poisoned yourself. And as of right now, there's really no proof that you can reverse that. Again, there is nicotine gum, steeping tobacco, and consuming that orally. People have said methylene blue, and then, of course, very recently, and continued, I should say, the business of chlorine dioxide. And diluting that in water, and of course figuring out the correct mixture for all of that, and that all of that gets rid of some of the nanotech and the spike protein, quote unquote, inside of the shots, and of course inside people's bloodstreams. And of course it breaks the blood-brain barrier also. So that becomes an aspect of this too, hence the psychosis from the last person that I read about. But even so, here's the summary of this particular study. It says the following, quote, COVID-19 vaccines have prevented millions of COVID-19 deaths. You see what I mean? They have to bookend their entire study with lies. They can't start off their study by saying there is no evidence of the existence of COVID-19. They can't do that. The study will never get published. But they have to continue with the COVID lie and say, well, it's been shown that taking the shots helps individuals and it keeps them alive. There's no proof of that. Zero. Absolutely zero. But they have to say that before they get into the meat of what the actual problem is. It goes on. It says, quote, yet a small fraction, they say, of the population reports a chronic debilitating condition after COVID-19 vaccination, often referred to as post-vaccination syndrome, or PVS. This is another completely made-up syndrome. It's called AIDS. It's called VAIDS. It's called poisoning. It's called having a ruined immune system. You can call it 1,000 things. But this is, again, just a rewording of all of this in order to, again, put certain people at ease and yet attempt to confuse others and gaslight others. It goes on. It says to explore potential pathological features associated with post-vaccination syndrome, or PVS, we conducted a decentralized cross-sectional study involving 42 post-vaccination syndrome participants and 22 healthy controls enrolled in the Yale Listen study, LISTEN. It's an acronym. Not sure what that stands for. It goes on. It says, compared with controls, PVS participants exhibited differences in immune profiles, including reduced circulating memory and effector CD4 T cells, type 1 and type 2, and an increase in TNF-A plus CD8 T cells. Post-vaccination syndrome participants also had lower anti-spike antibody titers, primarily due to fewer vaccine doses. Serological evidence, it says, of recent Epstein-Barr virus, or EBV, reactivation was observed more frequently in post-vaccination syndrome participants. Further, individuals with PVS exhibited elevated levels of circulating spike protein compared to healthy controls. These findings reveal potential immune differences in individuals with PVS that merit further investigation to better understand this condition and inform future research into diagnostic and therapeutic approaches. Again, I mean, that's the end of the summary, but we don't need any of that information because we already know. That's the problem with these peer-reviewed papers. You're talking about at least a dozen doctors were associated with this particular peer-reviewed article, and they're all engaging in more gaslighting. And then, of course, they say more studies need to be done because we don't know what this means and we don't know what other illnesses are entailed in all of this and what the real cause might actually be. But we know. You have the injected, the uninjected. Of those two, which one is becoming more ill? Which one has more symptoms and is showing more symptoms of being poisoned and being ill? We know the answer to that question. We don't need a peer-reviewed study to figure this out. Again, if you think that Trump derangement syndrome is next level insanity, when the COVID shots come off the market, all hell's going to break loose. You talk about a wake-up moment for endless people. They're going to start saying to themselves, oh my God, they just pulled these off the market and now I have injuries. I wonder if those injuries are from the shots. It will quite literally be the first time they ask themselves that question. So-and-so is dead, this person is dead, my daughter, my son, my mom, my dad, my aunt, my uncle, grandma, grandpa, cousins, whomever, neighbors, XYZ. They'll all start making those mental connections for the very first time. And once they're off the market to be tested, everybody knows what's going to happen after that. They'll never come back on the market because they shouldn't. And then what they'll do, because they'll have no choice, is to start going through every form of injection on the market, starting with flu shots and then working your way through all the other shots. And all you'll have to do is take those shots and put them next to COVID shots on a slide, look at both of them under a microscope and pay attention to the similarities and the differences. And this is where the shit's going to hit the fan. People are going to start seeing more similarities than differences between these shots. Just as much metal in the flu shots and nanotechnology inside of the flu shots as there is inside of the COVID shots. Same thing with RSV, pneumonia, shingles, pick one. Won't matter. It just won't matter. Then one by one, brick by brick, domino by domino, they all start falling down. This has to happen because it's obvious. As I say in the Substack article, William of Ockham, again, it's Occam's razor all over again. The answer always lies in the explanation that requires the least amount of assumptions. There was also this study too, equally as alarming and proves endless points that I, of course, have made publicly and made on the show, and you're well aware of also, because the evidence exists. We don't need much more proof than what our eyes and our ears can show us here, and we, of course, know this to be a fact. This particular study was accepted on February 13th here of 2025, and it was titled in the Journal of Molecular Therapy Nucleic Acids. It was titled mRNA 1273, is placenta permeable and immunogenic in the fetus? Again, written by a bunch of Chinese individuals, a lot of Changs, a lot of Wangs. Point being, what this study proved is they took a pregnant rat, injected it with an mRNA shot, and then it clearly showed that the mRNA and all the ingredients of that shot made its way through the placenta into the actual unborn baby rat. Now, you know what that means, of course, for humans, because that's already happened with humans. Again, this is already well known among humans. They want to keep doing it to rats, fine, go for it. But we already know what happens with human beings, which means there's absolutely no reason to be giving this to any animal or anything ever again. Again, killing the unborn rats inside of the rat's womb. Because the exact same thing, again, happens with humans. What this study proved, which is remarkably nefarious, is two things. Number one, the researchers are interested in continuing to use mRNA, regardless of its ill effects, as an actual therapy. And they actually believe that to some extent this is a good thing, because it allows them, again, to broaden their horizons, quote unquote, as they say, when it comes to prenatal mRNA molecular therapy. And they call it therapy. So they're not stopping when it comes to administering mRNA into anything or anybody. They view mRNA is passing through the placenta to an unborn animal or child as being a good thing. Joke's on them. All they did was just prove that this is the reason that unborn children are dying. Because their mothers have been injected with these shots and are taking these shots. In fact, what the researchers essentially did is they proved a negative. They inadvertently proved a negative. They were on a path of basically saying, well, we need to figure out whether or not the mRNA can make its way through the placenta to an unborn child, because if it does, that's a good thing. Little do they know that not only did they prove that, but all of the evidence that exists regarding unborn children and their mothers taking these shots, not to mention having those very shots on the actual vaccine schedule for brand newborn babies, is a bad idea. But giving it to women and pregnant mothers, or even mothers who want to get pregnant, is a bad idea also, because they can, of course, not have children as a result. There's an aspect, again, to all of this where I almost feel compelled to speak publicly yet again, but for the first time at, for example, a city council meeting, because these nitwits are all injected, and they were staunch pushers of these shots on the population in the town where I live, and have, of course, directly been responsible for the deaths of God knows how many citizens who live in this town. And have openly even done this, of course. They taxed themselves and put a tax on the last levy in the town where I live to increase the amount of paramedics that exist, but more specifically, the amount of ambulances that exist. Because they openly said, well, over the last few years, we've seen more ambulance runs than ever before, and they're out, they're understaffed and they're overwhelmed, and we have to help them any way we can. Well, why are they understaffed and overwhelmed? EMS workers took these shots too, and are falling over dead and are chronically ill. The meat wagons going around town on a constant basis, you can hear the siren, and they're picking up the jab injured and the jab dead. So they create the problem. They create a tax in an attempt to alleviate the problem, and then, of course, implement their own so-called solution for the problem that they created, believed, and perpetuated. This has to be thrown back at these people like a giant humble pie, one way or another. And so I would make this suggestion, and I've linked it in the description below of this episode, is my latest Substack article, again, of all of the headlines having to do with these COVID disclosures and these, quote-unquote COVID shots and everything else that are taking place here. Because this is a ball, again, that's been kicked down the hill that they're not going to get back. This is going to be a level of crow that they've never eaten before in their entire lives. If all you want to do is take that article and just email it to them, email it to a school board, email it to city council members in the town where you live, go for it. Do it. Throw it right back in their faces and say you were responsible for this. You were the ones, again, creating ordinances attempting to arrest people if they were gathering too many people in one house at any one time. Your police departments fell for it. Your fire departments fell for it. Your EMS, your hospitals, your doctor's offices, all you nitwits fell for it. Stay safe, everybody. Stay safe. All the yard signs, all the mask wearing, all the promotions, all of it. All the signage on the sides of buses. All these dumbasses did this, and they fell for this. And now it's all backing up on them. And unfortunately, they're so blind, they don't even know it. They don't even know what's going on right now. But these disclosures, again, they will not stop. They are going to increase, and it's going to be overwhelming for them. Absolutely overwhelming. So much so that if they come to grips with what they've actually done, they probably will never even bring it up publicly. It'll be too embarrassing for them. They'll just completely ignore it and brush it under the rug. Which, again, is where we all have to take a stand against this, I think. So, time will tell on all of that, but here's what I'll do again. In the description below, my Substack article will be included. On my website, under the Medical Documents tab, on the PDF that includes all of the COVID and mask-related peer-reviewed medical journal articles that I've been reading on the show, I'm going to add more to that list, like the ones that I just read from on this particular episode. And again, if you want to download that PDF, you can do so for free. And again, if you want to wake up some people and share that particular document with them, by all means, go for it. At the very least, you could send an email to these random people who don't have it figured out and just, plant a seed or light a fire under them a little bit and say, look what you've done, look what you've allowed for. This is happening right in front of your face, whether you can see it or not. Okay, with that said, ladies and gentlemen, have a great weekend, and I will catch you on Monday. Peace. Thank you for listening to American Education FM. Make sure and check out AmericanEducationFM.com for more information. Take care and God bless.